When I came to PazNaz and I started learning about the history of PazNaz, something that stood out to me is that this is a church that has been present and postured towards mission in her community for over 100 years. When you go back and you look at all these big and bold moves in the history of PazNaz, from Raymond Street and then Mountain and then to here at 3700 East Sierra Madre Boulevard, you learn about a people who it is in their DNA to lay down their lives for the sake of the mission. People that just give relentlessly for the sake of the future of this church.
Greetings to you from the First Church of the Nazarene, Pasadena, California. This is Pastor Earl Lee welcoming you as you listen to the music of First Church.
Earl had been a missionary in India, so he had this global vision. When he came here, there were several principles of his ministry, and one of them was no one was excluded. He was open to the community. Secondly, he was open to all ages. When children were in the service, he would grab them after the service and he'd say, "What did I preach about today?" And if they couldn't tell him, that was a signal that he was getting too complicated. He said, "I always want to keep the gospel on the lower shelf."
He and his wife Hazel were phenomenal at making every person in the church feel fully accepted and loved by them. From my perspective as a child, so remember 6 years old to 12 is when I was here, I felt all of the excitement from the activities that were occurring at the church. There was a sense of full church, not just my program and my thing.
We were told to, when we came in, release everything from our hands and then receive what God had for that day and thank Him for what we would receive.
He'd start every Sunday morning service with a greeting to everybody on Cassettes for Christ, what the weather report was in Pasadena, what was going to go on in the church, and then of course they would record the service. And then we had lay people who spent hours mailing those out.
As a Nazarene missionary, they would send out Cassettes for Christ to all of the Nazarene missionaries. I noticed how much my parents really looked forward to that familiar, comforting voice of Earl Lee giving out a greeting to all of the missionaries around the world. That went through the early 70s until I left home. So we were listening to the services of First Church for a number of years.
My wife and I, Vi, were here as youth pastors in 66 to 72. For us, it was the Christian Minstrels, our high school choir. Our goal was to be a choir comparable to a college choir, better than any high school choir. The last 3 years we traveled 40 days, went as far east as Washington, D.C. and watched Nixon sign a bill. And I remember the time that we decided we would do a concert, a program for the community who was coming in for the Rose Parade. We put on the program, figured about a $10,000 budget. We ended up short, and I had to go to the church board with Earl Lee and tell them that we were $4,000 short, and I didn't know where it was going to come from. Afterwards, they came by and shook my hand, said, "It's going to be all right." But one, Wes Samaras, the church attorney, said to me, "Just remember, the man is worth more than the money." So the next Sunday night, Earl said, "We're going to raise that money." So we sang a couple songs for the service, and when the service was over, I think it was over $4,000 cash was put into the plates. The support was just phenomenal. There were other ministries just as vivid going on at the time. There was an excitement. You didn't want to miss church. The whole atmosphere was, God is here, things are happening, and we don't want to miss. And maybe our neighbors would like to see too.
Our greatest growth was during that period from 1973 when Pasadena College left. And that could have destroyed the church. I mean, we could have dissipated and be gone. But we grew and grew.
They did a lot of personal witnessing in those days. They had a powerful personal witnessing program.
The church board had voted that they wanted to have a way of expanding into the neighborhood and showing that we were there for them, because the church site, there was a lot of housing right around where the church was. We were going out and knocking on doors, and it was a little challenging, to put it mildly, but we had a few little scriptures that we had to offer, and we offered each place we went. Is there anything you'd like us to pray for you, and anything we can do, any concerns you have? Where we live, we're over here, we're right close by, you're welcome to come to visit. And so it was a reaching out. It was love really manifest to the neighborhood.
We were running one service, one Sunday school. We grew and grew, and then we had 2 services and 2 Sunday schools, and we continued to grow. We ended up with 3 services in the few years after that, which forced us to buy this property here. This was just raw land. Earl Lee and his staff came and prayed around the pepper tree. They claimed this land.
One day, Earl brought us out here to the pepper tree, and he said, "I think this is where it's going to be. Let's pray." And so we prayed underneath the pepper tree. We looked at the ground, nothing here, but we knew someday it would be.
We were having people give pledges to pay off for a period of time. Pastor Earl went on a vacation and called back and said, "Take this signage in the sanctuary at Mountain Street. Take it down, because if we can't pay cash for this land, we have no business to think that we can move, because we can't do it." November 17th, 1974 was one of the greatest days when we raised the cash.
The money that came through to buy the property was so incredibly miraculous. To have people coming and making sacrifices of and beyond because they wanted to see this fulfillment of moving here.
That Sunday night was electric. People didn't want to leave, and we actually went $10,000 over what we needed for the bid on our first bid on the property. And then, 6 years later, we moved. But we had fundraiser after fundraiser after fundraiser trying to raise money. Mile and 6/10 toward the sunrise. Earl Lee coined that phrase. That's where we were moving, and every focus was on that. My wife and I really didn't have any money, and I wasn't going to borrow. I didn't believe in borrowing to give to the church. So I sold my car, sold it in 4 days, and had nothing. And I bought an old car. And I got to ride to the church, so it wasn't a walk for me. But I brought one of our oldest.
I walked.
He walked with my wife and my daughter. But Inez Robinson, who was a major part of this church, she rode with me in that old car. There was enough for 2. There was no back seat, so it wasn't a march for me, but it was a ride. Easy take.
I was about 5 years old. It was a long way. I remember it being a long ways to walk, but made the march.
It was just neat because families walked, the young and old, and we were all going as a body. There was the area out where the sanctuary is. We just had, like dirt, and the chairs were all seated around, but it was open, and it was a beautiful experience.
The field was transformed, and there was a lot of dirt and piles, and it was outstanding for toy trucks, and outstanding as I got older for like BMX bikes. Those are my memories growing up of watching it grow from a place where we came and played in the dirt to watching the buildings go up. I remember we rode our bikes in the sanctuary before, as it was being built, and it was just concrete. No chairs, nothing, just concrete. But down the aisles, I remember being excited for the gym to finally get done. I guess just being around as the church grew and was built.
I never not wanted to be at church. We had a sports ministry. At the time, we lived just a couple blocks up. So my girlfriends and I decided we'll be little cheerleaders. So we made our own little pom-poms and whatever and came down and cheered. It was a place of acceptance, a place of hope. I remember consistently as a young child inviting my teachers to things, inviting my children friends to things. And so there was that sense that is the good news. There's good news, and I want you to come join us on that.
Emotionally always feeling safe and welcomed, and that being home. As my dad tells stories about it being crowded, that's my recollection of church being full.
Back in the 90s, there was a lot of young couples here. There was a ton of youth. There was a ton of babies on campus. Early in our marriage, we decided that we were going to volunteer in the youth group, and to see the excitement of those kids coming every single Wednesday and building those relationships was fun. Maybe half of the kids that came on Wednesday nights weren't normal attenders or people that came to PazNaz on Sundays. But they were just from the high schools or from the middle schools, and they were coming, they heard about the skateboarding ministry or the Outback Adventures ministry or the backpacking, basketball ministry. There was just lots of reasons to be here on campus, and so they would show up on Wednesdays knowing this was the place to be. People doing life at the same time frame, having kids at the same age, growing up together, going to youth group, was super important to us.
Something that is very distinct about PazNaz is she is more concerned about the mission of God than internal affairs. And we see this manifested in so many different ways. There was a growing population of a homeless community just around the corner. And there was a group of people that said, we need to do something about that. And so one Sunday morning, they showed up with donuts and just to say, Lord, what is it that you have in store? What can you do here? And 17 years later, there has been a faithful group of people that are present there on Sunday mornings that cultivate a space for people without a home, for people less fortunate, for people down on their luck to come and encounter Jesus through a space of worship, through the Word of God being proclaimed, but also tangibly encounter the love of God through a warm meal, which might be the only warm meal that they have that week. And I think of so many other ways that PazNaz is concerned about the community and recognizes that she is a light in her community with helping hands. Again, a group of people gather together faithfully every Wednesday. Over 600 families every single week are serviced, which is just incredible and goes to show that we are a church that isn't only concerned about having the coolest programs or the coolest coffee shops or being the trendy church on the block.
As far as I know, we're the only church that has a bilingual Spanish ministry. We have an opportunity. I would say I worship more in English, but someone else, my husband, would worship more in Spanish.
One day they say to me, we have very good possibility if we find it one young pastor who is Spanish. He came and we start 1 or 2 meeting a month like this, and later we start open the Sunday school each Sunday. This is very, very good for us. We are very, very excited.
PazNaz doesn't only care about her local neighborhood, but she has for over 100 years been engaged in her global neighborhood just through the financial support of world missions, through work and witness trips. These are people that give up vacation days, they give up time, talent, and treasure to go to these places and participate in building of churches and universities and Bible colleges and parsonages, there to be the hands and feet of Jesus. When I came here on May 22nd, 2016, and I was installed as a senior pastor of First Church of the Nazarene, I realized what a big deal this was. I walked through this campus and I started to get to know people and I started to hear the stories. I was just so in awe of the love that the people here at this church have for their community, for this space, and for one another. And these are things that together we can agree that we can hold on to, that these are important, that this is who we are. How can we hold on to these things and also imagine new expressions of being present in our neighborhood, new expressions of being on mission, new expressions of being able to use this church and use this space for the good of the community and for mission.
How are we willing to evolve and appreciate congregationally what each generation brings and the strengths that each generation brings, and are we willing to accept those strengths, even though they may not be my strengths? The more families we can get hooked in to be part of our community, to feel like this is home, and to feel like this is their kids' home, the more we will grow, the more impact we'll have in the community.
We are in mission mode more than ever. We can't rely on folks to come and enter into our sanctuary just because they are looking for a church. But we've actually got to have boots on the ground. This campus here at PazNaz is one of the most beautiful campuses I have ever stepped foot on. And when you enter into the sanctuary, you see this big, beautiful space. And we've got to start rethinking that it's not about just getting people in and getting them into the sanctuary. And once we've filled all the seats, we've met our goal.
I think what we're looking at now is that there's an element, what I would call that that comes after that. We gather together so that we can go out into the world and be Christ to people.
We haven't really reached into the community. I think we've been here. It's visible.
Our church has become more of a commuter church. As that's happened, we haven't paid as close enough attention to our neighborhood.
So many churches that are started up in the last few years don't have the kind of facilities that we have that can enable ministries to happen.
We as a staff have been constantly asking, how can we use this space for places for people to come together, to be formed, to be held accountable, to dig into scripture, to lean into one another, to pray for one another. And how can we use this space continually for our community?
I think it will be outstanding for our congregation, and I think it will be an equal blessing on the community.
Together as a staff, after countless hours of conversations and dreaming and praying, this new mission statement has emerged, which is that PazNaz would be a church that would seek to know Christ and join him on mission in our local and global neighborhoods. That we would be a church that would still continue to value the formational practices, that we would be a church that values getting into the Word. We value biblical teaching. We value Sunday school. We value groups coming together, edifying one another, holding one another accountable. And so we value seeking to know Christ. And we also value joining Christ on mission in our local and global neighborhoods.
Now we're being called to the next challenge and the next mission. And I'm excited to see where we go.
It's not going to be on Terabeth's tremendous skill or ability, but it's going to be on God. And once we get on our knees and pray, it will happen.
We get to say that we participated in something new and fresh and exciting. Just like I hear all these stories of the march here to 3700 East Sierra Madre Boulevard, or I heard about that moment when they gathered around a pepper tree.
The decisions that the leadership made to bring us to where we are, and the hard decisions. The hard decision to say, no, we're not going to borrow to pay for the property, we're going to pay cash. I can't imagine what went into making that steadfast decision. But decisions like that have made all the difference in the way I think our congregation operates over many generations. And that's why I have so much faith in the church and so much faith in our specific congregation. Whenever this congregation's been faced with a challenge, we've risen to that challenge.
The future of the church is at a really exciting opportunity, a really exciting moment where we get to do something. And someday we're going to tell our grandchildren and we're going to say, we were a part of something huge. We joined Christ on mission in our local and global neighborhoods.